Thank you all for coming. We'll get started right in the next minute or so here. So the original title of this was How Not to Become Insulin Resistant or Diabetic. Either title is good. The one I picked is Your Liver and Pancreas, or Your Pancreas and Liver, What You Never Knew About Insulin Sensitivity, Diabetes, Fatty Liver, and Age. Now mind you, this is a culmination of all of these things, because the fact is, when we're young, we never have to care. But as we age, the dynamic changes, and suddenly we have to care. Now, as always, I am not a doctor. I am not even a nutritionist. I am not a nurse practitioner. I am not a nurse practitioner wannabe or a nutritionist wannabe or anything that has letters behind the name, and I'm not envious of those who are, because most of them don't know a thing about nutrition at all on any level. So I'm not one for disclaimers, but I'm going to give one anyway. Check with your doctor on any new eating routine or anything like that. Not that your doctor knows what they're talking about, but I'm just saying. You laugh with me. I'm partly laughing and partly serious, but just to let you know, this is life experience. This is my being extremely obese, losing the weight, and regaining health. I don't claim to be the picture of health or excellence, but that's I do possess a good measure of health, for which I'm thankful, and that same measure of health you can have. So that's the best I'm going to get with any notices today. Let's move along. Your liver and pancreas are very much the same. They work together. The liver has been called the most important organ in the body because it is constantly filtering and regulating. It's not doing what the kidneys are doing, which is just regulating, essentially. It is actually, or just filtering. It is regulating and filtering. So it is keeping chemical levels together. Now, how many people here have had an A1C test? How many don't know what it is? Oh, one person doesn't have any idea. Well, it used to be that nobody in this room would have an idea, because in the 80s, nobody cared. There was no diabetic awareness in the 80s. So you went to the doctor when you had to, when you got sick, when you couldn't stay awake, when you went into a diabetic coma, and then you found out you were diabetic. Today, there's a lot more awareness. A lot of people know what their A1C is. Well, your A1C is your averaged high and low blood glucose levels going back 3 months. That's what your A1C is. So I have you can see here, great is 5.3 to 4.5. You want lower because you want fewer of your blood cells glycated, which is how this test measures your A1C. To give you an idea, mine averages between 5.2 to 4.9. When I'm fasting, it goes at about 4.7 to 4.9, so it goes way low, which is great. You want a low A1C. Good is between 5.6 to 5.3, with 5.6 being the national average. Most people in America now who will very soon be struggling with diabetes are themselves just average. They're 5.6, which is getting close to danger level. Now, poor is 5.7 to 6.4. This is pre-diabetes. So if you are 5.7 or higher, you need to seriously be concerned with your level of health, because you're starting to get into a territory that means you need to watch. Bad diabetic is 6.5 plus. If your A1C is 6.5 plus, which of course is determined by a simple blood test, then you need to really get some help. 8 plus is terrible. That is an uncontrolled diabetic or a type 1 diabetic. Now, type 1 diabetes is a different animal, because the challenges it will pose are their own set of challenges. But if you were over 8, if you were higher than 10, you're really in trouble, and you need to seek help immediately, because you're not going to be on this planet for very long. Now let's talk about insulin versus glucagon. Insulin, we know, lowers blood sugar. Your body makes it when you eat. It circulates, it goes into your blood and takes the sugar and puts it into the cells to give you energy. Glucagon does the opposite. It raises blood glucose levels so that it's in sync. Now both have to be working. The liver, not the pancreas, makes glucagon. The pancreas makes insulin. So you have to picture a child tethering a ball, hitting a balloon up in the air that's losing its helium. So you bop it up and it stays up, and then it slowly floats to the ground. And then the girl or little boy bops it back up, and it stays in flux until the child is done playing. Well, that's how your body is with glucagon and insulin. It's constantly lowering the amount of sugar in your blood and raising it, because that's what its job is. It has to keep you within a functional range. And if you are someone who is diabetic, then you lose control of your natural ability to maintain blood glucose levels, because you either get too low or you get too high. Now, there's a misconception with diabetes, because some people think that it really sucks to have any sort of pinpricking, to prick yourself and take your blood. That's not what's challenging about diabetes. You can ask any longtime diabetic and they'll confirm this for you. The challenge with diabetes is the constant monitoring. Up, down, your blood sugar's high, you eat a meal, it goes up, then it's down. And sometimes if you are new to diabetes, you get used to the fact that your liver doesn't work. It doesn't make the right amount of glucagon, or any glucagon at all. So what happens? It tanks. Your blood sugar tanks, and you get weak, and you have to watch out so that you don't pass out. That's a challenge in and of itself. But that's the challenge. So what are your blood sugar levels supposed to be? Fasting, it's supposed to be 70 to 95. 70 to 95. You get up in the morning, it's supposed to be within a certain range. If it's higher than that, that's cause for concern. If it is lower than that, well, depends on how low, but it should not be lower than about 66, 68 when you wake up in the morning. If it's lower than that, then that's another problem. So after the meal, it goes up 110 to 145. Your blood sugar should really never be higher than 145. If it does get higher, it will, and you have a working pancreas, it's going to quickly be brought back down into the optimum range. To give you an idea, when I finish off some food, mine might hit 110, 106. The highest I've ever recorded mine at is about 130, 131, as far as I can remember. But that's a normal post-meal blood glucose level. Pre-diabetic is 145 to 200, with diabetic being 200 plus. Now, your blood sugar should never go into the 200s. It shouldn't happen. Even if you eat a lot of bananas, even if you eat a lot of ice cream, even if you eat a lot of chocolate bars, it should not hit that. It should come right back down to your optimum range if you have a working body. But of course, the more poor health condition you are in, the worse blood sugar control you have, the more difficulty it is to bring your blood sugar down. Your body will have a more difficult time. So let's talk about fast and slow acting insulin. You have two waves of insulin. The first is when you eat the food and your body kicks it into gear by your nervous system sensing that sugar is digesting on your tongue. It sends a signal down your esophagus, the nerve behind your esophagus, and it activates your pancreas to start making insulin. It is a chemical reaction, and it circulates in the blood. This insulin does, and it unlocks the cells to receive energy. It is the key. Second wave is made 2 hours after you eat, and this is slow-acting insulin. So you hear about diabetics that are insulin-dependent diabetics having to inject insulin. Well, there's fast-acting and there's slow-acting, and what it's doing is emulating what the body does automatically in most of us who are not diabetic. It won't take, the second wave won't bring down your blood sugar quite as fast. The first one will, because the first one is designed to get the sugar into your cells. The second one is to regulate. That's what the purpose of it is, and that's why diabetics who don't have any insulin response at all have to take slow-acting insulin overnight. This is to keep their blood sugars level. Otherwise, if they used first-wave insulin, it would collapse it down too fast, and they would perhaps not wake up at all. This is a challenge, folks. This is a challenge. So don't take for granted, the point is here, what your body does completely automatically. Your body does this automatically. If you have a compromised liver or pancreas, then you start to have problems here. So let's move along. How would our ancestors do today if they lived in today's world? If we go back 35,000 years, 45,000 years in the days of our hunter-gatherers, and we brought them into a world like today, what kind of challenges would they have? Well, they would have quite a few challenges, because unlike in their world, food is available everywhere. It's available in drugstores, it's available in gas stations, which are all over the place, it's available in restaurants, and you can take your pick, and you can put your spear and your bow down and your club down, because you don't need to kill anything, because a bunch of people have already done it for you. So all they have to do is go in and sit down and order what they want. But adding to this problem is the fact that nobody has to do anything for their food, and the food itself is not real food sometimes. The fructose in nature has been concentrated and taken out of fruits with nutritional value and put into things that have next to no nutritional value. So you get an instant sugar hit, but you get almost no nutrition. So how would they fare today? How would our ancestors do? Of course, you've gone ahead of me and already made the determination that they would get sick. They would get sick because why everybody gets sick? Look at today's world. It's a sick world because you don't have to be smart at all to figure this out. It's a sick world because that's naturally what happens. Never before in history have we had too much food and drink. So Solomon was generally right. There's nothing new under the sun except this. This is new in history, and the only exception was going back to what used to be called king's diseases, where the royalty who could afford to be waited on by servants and have food brought to them, and they would lay down all day, they would get water in their limbs, they would get edema, they would get swelling, they would of course get diabetes and high blood pressure and high blood sugar, and they were horrible because they never did anything and they never had to. And the doctors, the physicians, thousands of years ago noticed there was a problem. But outside of the king's diseases, there were no diseases. Well, how would bears do today? How would they do today? Bears have a gene. This is what separates the grizzly, the mighty grizzly bear, from us. They have a gene called PTEN, and it is a gene that turns off their love and lust for food. It does this by making them insulin resistant temporarily and blocking any receptive ability for hunger, so that they're not like you and I having to adjust to not eating. They naturally don't have the acclimation to eat. This is an evolved trait because they had to survive the long cold winters when all of the animals would go underground and hide, and there's no food, and the berries are going to freeze up, the fruits are going to freeze up for the long cold winters. There's not going to be anything to eat, so nature worked one of its most remarkable feats by giving them the ability to survive. This is followed by a phase called hyperphagia, and it is a ravenous eating response where their insulin levels get low and they have to fight to eat to keep them up. Once they get out of hibernation for the winter, they get out and they start eating. Now, what is my point here? The bear has an advantage that we have to emulate, but it's going to be tough. But even the mighty bear has problems today, as we're going to see. Bears have an acidity of 0 to -1. They can't get leaky gut. We can. We have a 10 plus. We have nearly 11 acidity in our gut, which is terrible. That's why a dog, like a bear, can eat bones, but you can't. You'll pass them and it'll tear your intestines because we're not equipped to do it. They can't get leaky gut. Bears consume 45,000 calories per day during their feasting season. We can't get close to that. Bears have perfect blood glucose control and insulin sensitivity, but even bears will get sick in captivity. And I refer you back to an article written by the Washington National Zoo, where they started seeing some of the same health problems in bears and other animals who were kept in captivity. And of course, how did something like the mighty bear fall victim to any sort of health problems? Well, the answer is Because you took them out of sync with nature. Whereas the fasting season for bears keeps them from overeating and developing health problems, the same is true for you. And of course, it doesn't take any great wisdom to see where I'm going here. If you set up a fasting structure in your life that is agreeable with you, that you can live with, mine is 1 meal a day, maybe yours is 2 meals a day, and no snacks. It depends on you. I recommend one meal a day. I live by that rule even still, even that I've lost, now that I've lost my weight. But if you do that, you will not have many, probably 98% of the health problems that most people have. So what are the signs of insulin resistance in diabetes? Well, let's start with insulin resistance, which is the precursor of diabetes. Moodiness, sleepiness after the meal. Now, you should not want to go run around the block after you eat. You should not want to go paint the house after you eat. You should want to relax in a recliner for just a few moments, or sit at your desk if you're at work. But you should not be so unfunctionally tired 45 minutes after you eat that you cannot think. That is a sign that your body is blocking your insulin. And I have an analogy when I talk about this. Michaela, my little one, is 11, and she always opens all these Dr. Pepper cans and puts them in the house. And I say, Michaela, please finish with one can before going to another. But what I'm actually doing is not helping her, because her body is so young and perfect and in sync that when she takes a sip, her body says, okay, we're good, stop. And that's what children do. Children can graze because their metabolism is still in order. They haven't been broke and divorced and depressed and started eating because they lost their jobs and because their boyfriend left them, or they don't have some crazy eating disorders developed. So they naturally eat and then stop, and eat and then stop, and then eat. But life destroys that. So as a result, as we get older, the body blocks and says, no more, stop right there. So we have sugar in our bodies that can't be absorbed. We become insulin resistant. What does sugar in the blood go to? It goes to your liver. When your liver fills up, it has to go somewhere. Your body stores it as fat. This becomes a runaway effect, and you keep getting fatter because you've become insulin resistant. Racing heart after you eat. You eat too much, too fast. You start racing. Your heart starts racing because you have surpassed your body's natural insulin levels, that it can make enough insulin to deal with the sugar that you're taking in. So what happens? Your heart starts racing a little bit. More hunger. Eating, but you're not being satisfied. Or more specifically, eating and wanting sweets. Why do you want sweets? Because your cells weren't fed, because you're insulin resistant. Your body blocked the nutrients, and your body's still calling for nutrients, but you give sugar. Your body has to block the sugar. It says this is too much. You see, it's a cruel catch-22 kind of. Hypoglycemia, also insulin resistance. Your body is not getting the nutrients, and yet it's trying to get them. But every time it tries to get them, it has to block them. So you have to fast to reset your body. Weight gain, of course. This is the result of all of these things, because you increase your intake because you can't help but suffer as a result of the condition. So you go many years like this not knowing what's wrong. What happens? You develop prediabetes. The inability, and this is characterized by the inability to go hungry. You get shaky. You have to sit down when you don't eat. That's a horrible sign. You should be able, your body should be like an auxiliary generator for a big building. When the power goes out, the auxiliary generator, maybe the lights flicker a little, but the auxiliary generator kicks in. You should start burning your body fat. But if your body's forcing you to keep eating and never to go without sugar in you, that's a bad sign. That's an indicator that this runaway overfeeding effect, this insulin resistance, it has you. Ravenous hunger, you're eating and not being satisfied. Receding gums. Look at your gums in the mirror. If you have good dental health and your gums are receding, that's an early indicator of diabetes. Itchy armpits when there's not a normal cause. Calf cramps, severe calf cramps for when there's not an electrolyte imbalance. Frequent urination accompanied by thirst. Blurred vision after eating. Don't confuse blurred vision after eating with age and eye adjustment. Your body will be more sensitive as you get older to the foods you take in, but you will know a difference because it will become a problem for you. Sick after eating. You feel like you have the flu after eating. That is another sign of prediabetes. And of course, dizzy or lightheadedness. Put those together, you have a problem. Types of diabetes, let's talk about this. Type 1 used to be called juvenile onset. This is caused genetically, and it's caused genetically because it's based on gene expression. If AACC, let's say, is the code of your body at a certain point, and you start making AAG, then your body says, this is a foreign protein, I'm going to destroy it. When that happens in the pancreas, the beta cells are destroyed. It happens early in life, that's why it's called juvenile onset. But there's another type, type 1.5, LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. This is when it happens at a later age. This is usually due to leaky gut, where something you ate permeated your lining and got stuck somewhere in your metabolism, usually in your pancreas. And as a result, the body's attacking it, but in the process, it's attacking your body's ability to make insulin. And as a result, you become diabetic at 40 or 50. Whereas if you'd had an autoimmune issue, it would have presented much earlier in life. Type 2, adult onset, so-called, caused mainly by overconsumption. You knew that going in. You'll know if it's this because when 2 weeks into your fasting routine or less, you'll reverse the problem. You won't be insulin resistant anymore. That'll take about 7 days to kick. Your blood sugars will go back to normal pretty quickly. You will not have long-term consequences. If you still have long-term consequences, you are a true diabetic, in which case you need to see an endocrinologist, because what you have, you'll have to manage. It won't go away with proper eating. How do you know? Here are the tests for diabetics. GAD65 or GADA. Now, you're not going to know what these are. Most doctors don't know what these are. If you go to your general practitioner with these, they're not going to have a god-darn clue what these mean. You have to go to an endocrinologist. A1C, EAG, those are kind of one and the same. They're very similar. IAA, IA2A, ICA, ZNT8AB, and C-peptide. You probably only know 2 or 3 of those, if that, but your endocrinologist will know. If you have those are indicators of autoimmune diabetes. So just take a pic of this if you're watching this on the YouTube channel later, or write it down. Go to your doctor, say, I want one of these tests. And if you have that and you have diabetes, that's why. And if that's the case, I'm terribly sorry. You will have to treat it. It's not something you can do. Getting back though, the majority of us don't have autoimmune issues. We have overconsumption issues, right? What's your name? Fred? Fred says, oh yeah, that's his problem. Well, he's honest about it, right? He knows. So non-alcoholic, NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is on the rise, folks. It's on the rise. And basically, as you can see from this picture, cirrhosis, a liver that succumbs to cirrhosis, is the same as general fat accumulation in the liver. So you can either eat candy or drink alcohol. The result is the same. If you overconsume, you will have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, even if you never drink a single drink in your life. That's the fact, and it is on the rise. But not all sugars are created equally. Here's a chart on non versus fatty liver causing foods. You can see to my right, your left, that the foods on the left do not cause a fatty liver. Carrots, apples, of course bananas, corn, those do not cause fatty liver. And we've actually done tests where otherwise healthy people were subjected to all sorts of sugars from fruits alone. They did not glycate the liver. The ones on the other side, boy, that looks good, doesn't it? Look at those Oreos or Reese's. Oh my God, that's good. Those do fatten the liver, just like the alcohol that you can see there. Another tip: do not combine competing fuel sources. If you want to manage blood sugars, keep your carbs separate from your fats and your proteins. It's a simple tip. If you want rice and beans, have rice and beans. You'll be just fine. You'll have a great day. If you want eggs and ham and bacon, have it. You'll have a great day. But don't combine pancakes and toast with your eggs and bacon. Or at least if you do, make sure that it's no more than about 90-10. Mostly one or the other. Why is this the case? because your body makes enzymes, and when you have sugar floating around, a competing fuel source to fats and proteins, what happens is your body opens up the cells and pulls in fat, which blocks insulin receptors, which only adds to the problem of insulin resistance if you have it, or diabetes if you have it. Follow that simple tip, folks. Honestly, you can eat a meal with a whole lot of carbs and have less of a blood sugar spike than if you take the same meal of carbs and you combine it with protein. Think of Chinese food, a big tray of kung pao chicken or something. It's going to raise your blood sugar because you've got sweet meat. You've got all kinds of grease and fat. You're going to get horrible blood sugar impact. Same thing with a pizza. Same thing with burgers and fries and shakes, but not with apples, carrots, beans, and rice. Whereas I have pictured here, beans, rice, a roll, and a banana. You see, there's ways to do this that are smart and tasty and won't even set you back too much. Now, why is this such an issue today? In conclusion, because we have too much food and no checks and balances anymore. We have nothing to regulate it. And again, back in only kings and nobility, was this ever an issue for? We never had, but that's the first thing. But the second thing is, we never had to worry about it until now. You see, someone can get out of college at 24, 26, 28, maybe 30, and be just fine. And that with going out and drinking regularly, if not heavily. But then once 10 years pass, say, they go to the doctor and an ordinary check reveals a problem. The doctor says, whoa, we need to do a liver biopsy on you. And all of a sudden your heart rate goes up. Or the doctor says, man, I'm worried about you. Your sugar is about to hit the roof. So for the first time in your life, you're faced with a health crisis. Whereas at 30, you did not have to worry about it. At 20, you certainly did not have to worry about it. At 10, you did not have to worry about it. How many of us, when we were 10, overdosed on Halloween candy? You sat there and said, I'm going to eat all the candy until I'm full. Well, then you just felt awful. Maybe you threw up, maybe you nearly threw up, but then you learned your lesson. You can't make a meal out of that. How many people? I know I did. I did it multiple times because I was just so stubborn. I wanted to try it because I thought I could outdo myself. But your body reacted. And when I went to see my grandmother at her 30-acre ranch, my grandmother and grandfather, my dad's parents, and I would say, Grandma, why don't you eat these caramel candies and these chocolate cakes? And she would say, well, I want to, Joseph, but my sugar's going to act up. I never understood what that meant. Well, suddenly, you're at a place in life where it becomes a shocking reality. You can't see as well. Your joints kind of creak. Now you've got problems that you never had to think about before. That's the other side of things, and that's the connection between aging and health problems and the lifestyle that you lead. But now, thanks to knowledge and cultural awareness, you're aware of these things. You're able to manage this. And it's not a lack of fun. It's just delayed gratification, which is what I am a proponent of. Delayed gratification. All right, how not to become insulin resistant or diabetic. Don't ever eat out of boredom. Follow these tips. If you follow these tips, you'll be just fine. Don't eat to compensate for losses. Don't eat because you lost your job or because your boss yelled at you or because you've had a bad day, someone treated you like crap. Don't eat from stress. Don't ever succumb to sweets cravings. That's fake hunger. If you're hungry enough to eat broccoli, you're hungry. Rarely eat to celebrate. Special occasions only, maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month. Don't snack. Put a damn it by that. Don't eat anything you wouldn't make a meal out of. Don't combine competing fuel sources when making meals. Cheat only once every 2 weeks. Get 15 minutes of sunlight per day. Walk 30 minutes per day and listen to audiobooks while you do it, ideally. Eat 1 or 2 meals, but with nothing caloric in between. You follow those rules, you're going to do pretty well. Folks, it's been wonderful. Thank you for having me.